Over the past month, it has become increasingly apparent that Hollow Knight Silksong is a complete and total disappointment, that nobody likes it, that it is a major downgrade from the original game, and that my review of it was completely spot on, that this was a disaster. And where did it go wrong? What did Team Cherry do to completely drop the ball this badly? Well, they spent way too much time on things that do not matter. They did not improve the core experience in any way, shape, or form. And the game is just all the worse for it because there is not a lot of exploration in this. It is kind of generic and uninspired. It does feel like a DLC for Hollow Knight, and it does not feel like a sequel. When you spend 8 years on a project like this, you would expect like better gameplay. You would expect expanded world. You would expect better storytelling and just like like a proper evolution. But Hollow Knight Silksong does not feel like a proper evolution. It feels like more of the same, but worse. In every single way, shape, and form. Maybe you could argue that Hornet is a more likable character than the Knight, but other than that, like, what exactly does Silksong do that made the wait worth it? And that's kind of my perspective on this at this stage. Looking back on Hollow Knight, like, what did they spend 8 years working on? Because this does not feel like that much of an upgrade over the original. If anything, it feels like quite a bit worse. Like, I don't understand how they put out Hollow Knight to begin with as quickly as they did, and then spent 8 years on this, something that does not feel like that much of an upgrade, something that feels like just like more of the same. Like, there's no real evolution. And one of the interesting things about this is just because we were talking about this on stream the other night. Like, where did this claim that only 3 people made these games come from? Because you can look on the credits for Silksong, and I believe Hollow Knight itself. Like, you see more than 3 people in those credits. Like, that seems to be the thing with indie games now, is to like try and gaslight you into like the leads, or like the core team like made the game by themselves, like, because that's been a reoccurring thing with recently. Because I know this was a thing with like Toby Fox and Undertale as well, where like the meme was that like he made everything himself, but in reality he outsourced a ton of stuff to other people, sprite work. He plagiarized all the music. Like, that's all stuff that's very well known at this point. But when it comes to Hollow Knight, like, this is, looking at the credits, very clearly not made by 3 people. So, like, to me, it almost seems like it was made by 3 people. It's just a marketing buzzword. And I really have to wonder, like, how much of Hollow Knight's development we've been misled about. Like, what about the game just isn't true at all? Like, one of the things that really gets to me, something that I've been thinking about and talking about a lot, is just how derivative Silksong's plot actually is. Because, I played it and I thought that, like, oh yeah, Act 3, this is really interesting. I really like the twist. I really like the way the story progresses. I really like the, how, the stakes. I liked it. But someone came in and told me that this was just a straight up ripoff of Bloodborne, with like with the plot twist in that game. I've never played Bloodborne, so I can't speak to the truth of that. But like, it really brought me back to that feeling of playing Hollow Knight for the first time, where, I just had this feeling that it was just ripping off Dark Souls. Like, it felt way too samey. It had similar mechanics in a similar setting and style and tone. I liked Hollow Knight more than Dark Souls because it doesn't feel as finicky and as broken, and that should that should speak volumes about what I think of From Slop, what I think Hollow Knight is better than it. But like, looking at Silksong, like, why don't they have more innovative ideas? Why do they just rip off Bloodborne, or like, From Slop, and just convert it into a 2D action game? Like, that's all they've done here. Is that this is like Salt and Sanctuary with bugs, okay? Like, it's so like transparent, and yet people are just kind of bamboozled by it. Maybe because they don't know enough about Dark Souls lore, because I didn't realize Act 3 was a straight up ripoff of Bloodborne because I've never played it. But We've been told over and over and over again that Hollow Knight is this super original, fun, exciting, original indie game with this really cool lore and story, and it just isn't really true. Like, I've talked a lot about how like the story of Silksong doesn't really make any sense and really should be like kind of condemned by the community. But like, I think to a certain extent that also extends to Hollow Knight because if you think about it, like all the stuff we know about the lore is all speculation from fans, from people like Mossbag who speculate on things that are never directly stated in game. So what that means is that like much like Dark Souls, where you have like Zanzibar, forgive me, like much like that, the hype and enthusiasm around Hollow Knight's lore hinges entirely on the fan community who are just blatantly making things up. Like the lore in Hollow Knight is not that interesting. And that's something that I've been saying for a long time, especially considering just how much of it is directly ripping off from Slopware. It's a major problem with these games that I don't really see a lot of people talk about. In fact, I think I've seen Mossbag claim that Team Cherry denies any inspiration from Dark Souls at all, which is like completely 100% retarded. Like I would say Hollow Knight takes more influences from Dark Souls than it does Metroid. Even though Metroid's the superior IP and is way better made and has had a way longer legacy and all that, a far more difficult IP. The similarities to Souls goes way deeper than the similarities to Metroid. Like Hollow Knight really is not that similar to Metroid at all. I would argue it's not even really the same genre, honestly. Like they play completely differently. But like my take on this is Silksong, from the moment it was officially was confirmed, was hyped up to be something to a level that it could not possibly meet because everyone thought that the sequel was going to be this genre-defining classic, that it was going to be the best game ever made, that Hornet was going to become a video game icon, that it was going to surpass Metroid in relevancy, that there was going to be this huge, like, game of the year release. This was supposed to be like a major milestone for indie games, and it just isn't. And that's the thing that really gets me about Hollow Knight. A game I was like relatively enthusiastic about. I love the original, but Silksong, like it just feels to me that the community just rallied behind this game in spite of all the very clear indications that there was something very, very wrong in development. Metroid Prime 4, has gone through like a similar kind of hype cycle. And no one's looking forward to that at this point. People have like bloated that, like hyped that game up, and there's just nothing really to say for it. But unlike Metroid, in which people are perfectly willing to say it doesn't look good, like Silksong was always treated as if when it finally does come out, it's going to be this amazing experience. And now that it has, it just isn't. And like more and more people are coming around to my line of thinking that Team Cherry massively dropped the ball here. That they don't give a shit about the Citadel, about Grandmother Silk, about Lace. They don't give a shit about the plot. Like there are things to like about Silksong, but like this is a 50-hour long game. Playing through Silksong is just a nightmare with very few high points that make the trudge worth it. It's crazy how poorly designed the bosses are, how poorly thought out the mechanics are. Like Silksong is not difficult. Darkside Phil is like getting through the game. Like if you get enough masks, if you get enough tools, if you like build your character properly, if you like you can do things like poison your cog flies. Like I didn't even think to do that because that just seemed like so obviously broken to me, but apparently that is a thing. You can poison your cog flies. Like there's just so many things you can do to just break the game in two and just completely demolish it. Like to me, the game just feels very, very broken and uneven. Like it's the game you struggle with before you unlock everything, and you have the ability to just kind of do whatever you want. Like it's crazy how I managed to get through the entire thing without even fully upgrading my weapon. It's crazy thinking about like how quickly I beat like the final boss of Act 2, on my first try. It's crazy thinking about like everything this game did to kind of let me down and disappoint me, and like I'm constantly coming up with new reasons to be upset at this game, to be upset at Team Cherry, to be upset at the fans really, because I don't think it was unreasonable to be skeptical about this game. Like I do think like this game's core problem, like at its absolute core, this should have come out within like 4 years of Hollow Knight's release. Like this is something that should have come out in like 2021 at the absolute latest. Like I think if they didn't spend so much time padding out the game with nonsense, if the areas weren't so big, if they cut down significantly, like you can cut out like all of Act 2 in this game and like pretty much lose absolutely nothing. Like imagine beating Last Judge, immediately going into the next room, and then fighting Grandmother Silk, and then going to Act 3, Like that would be way better than what we got. Like the Citadel is just garbage and adds nothing of value to the game at all. Like it's something that really should be studied and talked about more, honestly. Just like how this game is a really good example about having a bigger map in this kind of game doesn't necessarily make it better, because so much of this game is just nonsensical platforming and just getting to a boss fight that takes too long to run back to. It's like it doesn't feel like the game is a challenge in the way it should be challenging. It feels tedious, annoying, and boring. Truth be told, like there were so many times, like I was bored throughout like almost my entire playthrough. Like it's shocking to me about how little that Silksong did to really feel as if like it hit the mark. And now, a month later, like it really feels like one of the most hotly anticipated indie releases of the decade turned out to be a flavor of the month release, which is kind of crazy because, going into this, I really expected Silksong to be like reasonably good. I expected it. Like I thought it could be better than Bonanza. I thought that I was really going to like this, but at the end of the day, I've turned into one of the game's harshest critics, and I feel as if I am not alone in saying that. And more people are coming around to my way of thinking.